Welcome to Curious Goldfish, a podcast community where music and curiosity come together through interesting conversations with the music makers of our world. I'm your host, Jason English. You can find Curious Goldfish in all the major podcast and social media platforms. And of course, we have all of our content on our website, curiousgoldfish.com. Hey, Jessica, it's an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you. You know, you've been on the Opry 60 times. You've been on cable television. You've been on America's Got Talent. But you're finally on the Curious Goldfish podcast. You've hit the summit, I think.
Well, it's very on theme. I'm a fisher now. So anything that's, nautical, we're going to give it a go. So.
You're all in on that? You're all in on that? Okay, good.
Yeah, I brought some trays and different items that have, fish themed decorations, and I have a big family, and just over the holidays this past Christmas, one more sibling was like, "Oh, I get it, fish." Okay, cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to the Curious Goldfish podcast. It's a pleasure. How's your weekend shaping up here at 30A Songwriters Festival? Have you been here before?
It's just beginning. No, this is my first time. Yeah. And so I am excited to, there's a lot of people here. I've been to the 30A area, I guess 2 times. But I just don't think it's ever been quite this happening. I was wrong thinking this might be a downtime. Not at all.
Yeah. They're smart to schedule it in January, but it doesn't feel like it's January.
Exactly. Right? It's a little disorienting, but last night was, welcome, got to meet a few people that I know, a few people that I don't know, and I'm excited to catch what other... I just get really inspired by stuff like this. I think festivals in particular, I've done other types of festivals growing up, and that was always the spot. I always had a spike of creativity afterwards, and this is my first songwriting festival ever.
All right, awesome. Do you have any specific goals this weekend of people to see or things to do?
I mean, I went through the app, which is very handy, but I got very overzealous. So I just was like, oh, they sound cool, or, oh, I know them, I have to see them, and just started adding. And then Saturday is 300 something, not that many, but I was like, that's not physically possible. So we're going to have to narrow it down. Okay. So I'm very overambitious with all the things that I want to see.
It's better than not being ambitious, I think. So, all right. Well, good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
And we're here at a beautiful location. This is my 3rd festival. The second one I've been doing the podcast, and it's great how they do it because it's not 4 main stages and back to back to back to back. It's all spread out, and you could be in a cafe with 15 people, or you could be in a space with 300 people. It could be one person performing or a round. It's a good variety.
It reminds me of Americana Fest is one other festival that I was involved with, and it's oh man, that place is at capacity, or trying to strategize. We already went to try to go to one this morning. We were like, that line's too long for us to get in there and do the next thing. So keeping us on our toes. All
right. Well, so in terms of music, it's been a little bit of a minute since you released a full album. You have some singles out there, but I guess where are you at with that process? Are you writing a lot of songs? Are you recording? What's planned for this year?
So look, I set myself up for a little bit of a failure year or two, because I had a whole previous life with being the lead singer and fiddle player of a family band. Right. We don't have to get into that. We can if you want. Right. And then I took a break from that, did a lot of therapy, did a lot of soul searching and recalibrating. And then in 2022, I put out my first solo record. I put out a memoir. I turned 30, and I was just like, woo, we're doing we're starting over.
Yes.
And then at the end of 2023, I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Oh my gosh.
And so the last 2 years have been, a lot of writing. I have other writing projects. I'm currently writing a novel. I'm putting out an album in this spring, in a couple months, and have had some singles and some collaborations that I did last year. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that is lining up and getting ready to come out, but I've had some periods of impatience.
Okay.
Because I think when you do something that is really, really meaningful and is a level of, I would say, successful for me personally. Like, I don't think for me it was too much about numbers or reception. It was more about accomplishing something. And then I was like, how do I keep accomplishing at that level? And it takes time to accomplish things like that.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. So the previous album, I think, was called Brand New Day,
Correct.
Which sort of marked a new chapter with all the things, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But I know that the album isn't named yet, but in terms of the songs and the themes, is it a departure from that, the Brand New Day and the break?
I see it as related. My artistry, I would say, is just really just from the heart, and it's about being honest, and it's about, I would say that first record, Brand New Day, I mean, it's kind of in the title there, but it's about starting over and what that meant to me in each track, if you listen to it, with the idea of each track representing some way of starting over.
Right.
I think that kind of shows a bit of insight into kind of the whole 30 years up until that point that I had lived, and there was a lot to process, a lot to go through.
Right.
And then, the theme of moving forward, and, kind of drawing a line in the sand and saying before and after. That was kind of the whole approach to that record.
Yep.
And then this album is very exciting to me because the theme is about growth and continued healing and coming into another level of like vibrancy and authenticity and a bit of embracing that idea that some things, I think every day can be a brand new day. Every day is full of potential, and if you have to, just start right now. And some things also, though, take time. You have to plant seeds, you have to water them, you have to pay attention to the cycles and the rhythms of our own life, of the world, of nature, of all those things. So I see them as related. I see them as, a nice continuation. For me, I think I have embraced the idea that there's a lot of processing and healing and recovery that I will be doing my whole life, and art is a big part of that. So there's like therapeutic and meaningful things for me personally on, kind of every project I do. But I think there's kind of a celebratory element and a groundedness in this upcoming record that I'm excited to share with folks.
So where do you think you are as an artist today, and then where do you want to be?
Oh, I just want to make art for the rest of my life. Great question. I'm in a place where I feel like I am trying to, like, even just in the last few days, Pete and I were driving down here. Pete is my manager and father-in-law, and I got no shortage of ideas, and whether it be songs or writing projects, I find it very hard to just pick one thing. Life's pretty rich, and there's a lot of things going on at the same time. Great. So I think, I'm an author and a singer-songwriter and an artist. I'm trying to get the tour and the live element going. We've made some good progress in that. I'm excited for the release of this upcoming record, and guess what? I have 2, 3, 4 more that are in the back of my head. So we're just gonna, try to make decisions for longevity, some staying power, because that's the goal. And I don't see myself as being there, but I see myself making decisions that can take me there.
Nice. I love that answer.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, good answer. So you mentioned the memoir and the author. So the book is called Unspeakable. So I read it to prepare for this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I have 3 takeaways.
Okay.
All right. Just
go for it.
Just me not knowing you.
I feel like I'm like...
trust me, it's nothing like earth-shattering, but 3 takeaways. Because there's a lot. And it's like, okay, how do I summarize this in my head so I can ask the right question and get the right sort of context. So the first takeaway is you lived through hell, right? Second takeaway is you're strong. And the third takeaway is you married an angel.
Oh.
I mean, he's got to be an angel on earth.
Well,
right?
I mean, I don't think anybody's perfect, but he's my dude. I guess my reaction to kind of those takeaways are, I did go through quite a few hard things, and there are a lot of nice things kind of in there as well, which is confusing and hard to kind of sort through. And I'm not really shy about talking about it. I mean, not just in the book, but I think sometimes people kind of, it's almost like exercising a demon, and then they get it out, and then they're like, that's it, that I don't want to talk about it. And I knew that could be a possibility of what would happen, but it's led to me really kind of integrating and owning and being able to talk about. It's not always appropriate in every conversation.
Right.
It can be very awkward.
Right.
But, so many other people are living through some of those worst things. In fact, the numbers tell us it's any gathering that you have, there's some survivors of some abuse there of certain kinds. And I don't think it really serves us to make it harder to talk about those things. Yeah. I think raising awareness, creating safe spaces. I think some of these terms are starting to they have like a buzziness and people are all saying them, but I think the lived practice of doing it can be quite challenging. Otherwise, if it was easier, we would all be doing it quite well, and it's still a challenge. Right. But yeah, I think that I agree that it's hard, and some days are still hard because I am in a great place where I have felt strong. I can look back and I can say, I'm proud of how far I've come. I have so much to be grateful for, so much to be excited about. And again, those things can both be true at the same time. For sure. For me, trying to move forward while also honoring, I think if you have long-term abuse, and I had just about every type of abuse that you can think of, especially in my earlier years, those things change us. And if you don't have time to process them at the time, that's just a backlog. So kind of back to what I was saying about the therapy of making art. And then, having a partner that gone through like everything that was supposed to break us apart just kind of made us stronger. And still to this day, we just passed 10 years of my husband and I having met each other.
That's awesome.
We met backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. Yeah. And there's still things where we kind of laugh and be like, in some ways, like, we should not have made it. Do you know what I mean? Well, like, it's quite a crazy story 100%. And different things where, I was raised very, very religious, and I don't have nearly as many of the same beliefs that I grew up with or were kind of put onto me. But it is quite interesting to do how did we end up, like, the coincidences or the not coincidence of us meeting, and then it's a great story.
No, I mean, I have so many things to say about Sean, just as a guy who has a daughter. I'm gonna do the impossible, I'm gonna try to do the impossible, which is to recap, just so everybody's level set. Okay. Just like, the book is about just an incredible story of your family, musicians, America's Got Talent.
As
the reality,
one of 12
kids in a family band.
Homeschooled family band. Yeah, and was in that until my early 20s.
Yeah, early 20s,
and it looked pretty on the outside to most people, but there was a lot of toxic things underneath. Yeah. And so it was really hard to get out of that, and then hard to just try to reclaim. Well, we use the analogy a lot, like reclaim one's voice. And for me, that was quite literal, because we were singing. There was recordings of my voice, and these were songs mostly that I was writing many times. And then, we would do interviews, and we would talk, and we would tell this story, and the gap between, what was really happening or happening when the cameras weren't there, that gulf kept widening and widening. And it was really hard to just hold on to sanity and certainly like safety and all those things. So, well,
you've talked a lot about context. People will say, didn't you see the signs? And like, I think you've even said that people would see your dad out. It's like, I knew there was something weird about him. And I think you've commented that, like, hindsight can help in sort of put things into perspective that's different than when you're in the moment, right? It
can. And I think too, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I know that there'll be like a part of me or my gut or wherever how we would try to articulate that something feels off, but also like the part of us that gives people the benefit of the doubt. We need that part. Yeah. And that plays an extremely important role. Like, if any of us want to be in relationship, if any of us want to be a decent human being, we need to be able to see the good in things. We need to be able to not be paranoid, and yet how do we balance that with some part of us, whether it be our subconscious or not, going, something's off. So I think some people truly were having some experience that did not rise to the surface of articulating in the moment or taking an action. And I don't blame anybody that had that sort of like twinge and because I've had people be like, why didn't I do something, like something must be wrong with me. I'm like, no, that's what predators and perpetrators are taking advantage of.
Sure.
If there's a young vulnerable person that they're preying on that person's trust, that person's vulnerabilities, and to some degree, when we move in circles and we want to have friends and we want our trust and we want to be part of a community, it takes a certain level of letting people in and when someone has a nefarious, long-term, obsessive purpose, we can't always see that.
Yeah. You talked about, hey, there's a huge gap with what the public was seeing and what the reality was. I think for me, the best example of that I don't know if is obvious to everybody was before everything sort of blew up in terms of the public knowledge of what had happened, your family was on the 700 Club.
Okay. And I can't believe you're bringing this up because I was just actually refreshed my memory about this because it's sad the amount of oldest girls from large families who are in music and in religious circles, and we just get together and we go, yeah, same. Or we go, did you have this?
Right.
No. Did you do this? Yes. Okay, wow. And it's like we laugh and we cry. And I was just doing this with some lovely ladies, and we specifically brought, it's still on YouTube.
Yes.
700 Club is a religious, Christian thing. And that was one of the last interviews I did with my family.
Yes.
And so when I do kind of get into the nitty gritty of this, that is one of the ones that I point to.
Yes.
Because I think in my family's story, it's totally just my subjective opinion, I think one of the most convincing things was not necessarily did you get a weird feeling with my dad or not? Could you see through? It's looking at all the rest of us. Dad is just one person in that whole group. And here's the rest of us.
Oh my gosh. Well, no. Yes. Well, yes.
Yes. How could they're happy. How could they be happy if something bad is happening? And I think that that's certainly not the only, the way that we look and our story is not, and we're not just one story. There's 14 of us in my family, 12 kids and 2 parents, and we all have our own different story.
Right.
And I'm mostly centering just in mine because I can't really speak to all the specifics of their experiences. But there is this weird thing where we think of families, of bands, of groups as kind of like a 2D thing. And here we all are smiling and playing our part. We're each playing a part.
Right.
And I think that really kind of undermines our individual, certainly deeper truths, certainly the secrets that for preservation had to make sure that they didn't come out. But there were cracks. There were cracks that were starting to come up at the end. And there was a couple shows where I started crying on stage when, it's smiling 1 second and then you could see something is wrong. I lost a lot of weight and I just really, really was struggling. And part of me was oh no, my body's letting me down. And it was you're weak, and Dad was certainly using that. But really I can look back and be wow, I was surviving a lot. Right. We all were. Right. And there, it was a cry for help, really, from my body, from my emotions, that was truth. Me starting to cry when we're singing Edelweiss about family and, and just being this isn't right. Yeah. That was the moment of truth and somehow strength, but not how we think of it. And anyway, that one interview is crazy to watch because I'm sitting on my hands and I'm
well, no. So can I just tell you something? So
I look so angry.
So it's yes and, right?
And they're don't show Jess. Yes. They pan away from me.
Well, so here's what I call.
So I would get in trouble because it would be your face looks bad.
Well, no.
Someone will get some ideas of things aren't all okay.
So I was watching.
Don't play it right now.
Well, no, no, I'm not gonna play it. But when I was watching it, I'm okay, they're happy. It's the family, and then your father goes in on some craziness about 66 books of the Bible.
Yeah, he's talking about the Bible.
All the things. If you actually look at him talking, and then you're in the frame, it's stone cold stare to the ground. And if you didn't know any better, you'd be well, she's worried about what she's gonna have for lunch or something. But that, going back to the context,
I guess, the hindsight is she must have been.
Well, you're basically going, this.
How dare he?
This asshole is actually talking about faith and the books of the Bible and that what our destiny is, and and you could just see it in your eyes, and
it became so ludicrous.
Yeah, I watched it 3 or 4 times. I'm this poor thing is having to sit through this, and it's crazy that they caught on to it, that they were trying to get you out of the shot. That's why.
Yeah, I think that was one of the ones where I got in trouble after.
I mean, it's
ruined that interview.
That look on your face was just okay, Yeah. Anyway,
this is a nice interview, though.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I used to know all the 66 books of the Bible. I don't know that so much. Actually, I was going to ask you. So I grew up in the Buckle the Bible Belt.
Okay.
Church camp, 3 times a week, youth group. I went to Bible college for a hot second, like all those things. I guess, I mean, I'm not comparing that to the worldview and everything that I think your parents wanted you all to have, but what's your faith story today? Like, is
a
it
jumbled one?
Is it jumbled?
Yeah. I still think there's a lot that I'm sorting through, and I think in good conscience and good faith, like it can't be what I was raised with, and
No,
what
it's
I
not,
was
yeah.
raised with
Yeah.
was kind of like our family, in that there's this outer presentation. And it's kind of like, look at this whole evangelical idea of being like salt and light and having like an outward testimony, like capital T testimony, and that it's your job to have a good testimony. And that can be, I was a broken person and I had hard times. It's not like you have to be perfect. But the idea is it all needs to lead back to Jesus and God,
yes.
and living a certain way, and then living according to... It's hardly ever pitched this way, but in reality, in practice, in those environments, it's like a lot of rules, and like especially for female children, a lot of rules in how you look and what role you're allowed to have. And I don't think that all evangelical families or religious spaces are abusive. They're not. But part of my question is, I know my dad as an individual was a bad, not necessarily in this like evil, like I don't necessarily know that I believe that, because I don't think that he was like, let's be evil. Like I think he really, from what I can tell, was very justified and had his ways of like, I don't even really want to be in that head, but nobody's like, I'm Hitler. Like nobody thinks that way, and it's like feeling justified and like, I'm the right one here and I'm the one with this authority, and I, whatever we're doing to dissociate. I mean, I had to learn a lot of coping mechanisms that really became maladaptive and became very unhealthy for me just to get through the bad things. And like, if we're doing horrible things like that, like just things are not right in there and in here. So I know all those spaces and are not bad or meaning to be bad, but if there is an individual purposefully, whatever, sidestep that argument, say there's someone abusing in your congregation, in your family, in your group, in whatever, how does the system have a solution? And this is fair of non-religious spaces, but I think that there's a lot of things in these circles where if the person's good, great, everything works out. If they're bad, you have no recourse, because the women and children, who are usually the ones that are preyed on, are given kind of a second-class citizenship. And whether it's ever told to you explicitly or not, if you're raised to think that you deserve nothing but hell and punishment, and as a female, the best thing that you can do is be a wife and a mother and obey your father and be like a meek, submissive person. But you better speak up if something's ever bad is happening to you. When we just see over and over, your actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And
you side with, but we're going to actually let that pastor go back and have his congregation. And anyway, what a rabbit hole.
What the whole theme though, like the weaker vessel, and you talked about the women and the role in the family and everything. I think one of the crazy things out of that book, and you didn't come out and say this, but it's like, okay, men want sex more than women, right? Men want sex, which leads to babies, and then the man is giving the woman shit for being overweight because she's having so many babies.
So many mixed messages. Just like,
it's crazy.
I don't know. I guess that's where some of it's like there's certain things I feel very clear about. For me, figuring out if there's like a different version of Christianity than what we were raised with, the answer is obviously yes. There are so many different 100%, subsets.
100%.
The thing is like being raised in fundamentalism, you're all the way on one end of the spectrum. I would say the most extreme end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And everything else feels very strange, because it's like, but guys, like it's the same book and it actually says those things. And people are like, no, but there's like a softer, better way to interpret it. And I want to be able to hear that. I want to be able to talk through that. But it is very like, but it's still poison. And if it's like, oh, but there's only a little bit of arsenic in the cake, it's like, well, but it is there. I don't think I want that cake. Like, anyway, and I think people are just saying, people have said, and I come across people being like, well, it's not the system's fault. Your dad was a bad apple. And I'm like, where do we think he came from? Like where, we are all shaped. We are so shaped by the messages that we get as children, and the way, like, if you, I don't know, it can go a lot of different ways, because it can get very political. It can get very, certainly emotional and personal for me. Yeah. And at some point, my journey is my own. But I'm in a weird spot a lot of times where I go to talk about what it was like being raised in that, and people do not believe me. They're like, it can't be like that. That's crazy. Not in America. Like, not where I live. And I'm like, take me to your town.
Yes.
And I will show you where this is happening. Yes. And it's, when you are kind of homeschooled and home churched, and you're off the grid.
Yes.
But we're really big. Like, we as in, like, people raised in that. And 100%. We either, and there's a whole range of response, but I know people that the minute they run so far from that, and then for every person that stays in it, they might also have 10 children of their own and raise them that way. And, it's weird to be in that spot where you kind of feel like the canary in the gold mine. Yeah. And you're like, guys, this is a very militant, it's a big deal. And then, not be welcome, really, because you're no longer one of those people. Yeah. And because you've kind of left some of that, you're a black sheep over here. And then over here, you're just like, well, you sound crazy. I'm like, I know. Yeah. But it's also true at the same time.
Well, it speaks to what I was saying about earlier about your strength, is like the fact that you're even willing and open to having a faith in a God that is even similar to what you were raised with after what you went through shows your strength of, like, okay, there's something bigger, there's something out there. It may be not what I was raised in, but I'm open and curious to figure that out. That's a really strong sign of strength.
Thank you for saying that. I think for me, and I might be rethinking what song I play, because I wrote a song a few weeks ago, or months ago at this point, I guess. But just a very practical example of how this is very much an ongoing thing for me. I read a female author named Rachel Held Evans, who has sadly passed away, and I was super mad because she was kind of close to my age and was in Tennessee, and I was like, I could have actually met her. We could have had some conversations, and like a lot of her words really resonated with me. And she had used this line, like, on the days that I believe. And that, like, really hit me, because I was like, I really resonate with that. Yeah. And I think that the things that keep me open are not any particular building or community or teaching at this point. Most of those things feel like a reason to distance myself. But I would say, whether it's my relationship with my husband or just someone that I meet briefly, a close friend, relationships in general, nature in general, and art in general are the things that make me, some part of me, be like, there's gotta be something more. Yeah. There's gotta be something more, because we're dipping into it. We're playing with it, and we don't fully understand it, whether it's writing a song or, like, falling in love or, having something like faith and it not mean what I was taught growing up, but to mean to jump without guarantee, to take a risk, to show up for myself or for someone else that I care about. And, I would say there's lots of different parts. I mean, certainly being an artist today takes a lot of faith, I feel like. Yeah. And so just having kind of different, wider definitions of those things. Okay. I don't think I'll ever be someone that just thinks, well, we're just all, physical things, and then we won't be here. Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. But I think when it does get you so young, indoctrination and learning about cults was extremely interesting to me, because I recognized a lot of my experience in that. Yeah. And that's a really hard thing to undo. Yeah. Like, having a different experience so young, and being, if I'd been on the other side of the world, how different would I see the world? Right. There's no way it would be exactly like this. Right. And why would I want to be entrenched and not look outside my little tiny slice of not only just my experiences and the influences that I've had, but there's a whole world out there. Yeah. Well, you made the comment earlier about how bad it was. There were still some glimmers. Could have been the music, could have been the relationship you had with your siblings, but the biggest glimmer I saw in that book was, again, my third point, which is your husband. Like, he's a great example. If the women out there that want to show their men in their lives an example of, like, a partner, I
mean, he was doing it from day one. And what I loved the most, though, was like pretty early on, you talked about how he would sort of send you, hey, this is what a narcissist is. Or this is what a,
he was,
and he was trying,
learning those things. So it's not like find somebody who, he was a therapist and he was an expert and he like spotted this. It was, I think in some ways, an openness of being curious, and I don't think it would go so far as to say being gullible or anything like that, but he was very willing to kind of step towards me and my family. Like he would go, he would visit, and he would kind of on my family's terms, we were having this relationship. We were getting to know each other. And then at some point realizing something is not right. And then for him to basically reach for help. Yeah. Like, I don't feel like I did like got out or the bravest things that I've done. I had a lot of help and he had a lot of help, and everybody that was helping him was helping me. Sure. Everybody that's helped me has like helped my whole family. And, I think I remember when, right before we got married, like being in a closed system and making a connection with someone on the outside of that particular bubble is a whole phenomenon. Like it's a pattern and sometimes I think they're called like trapdoor relationships, and they don't always like go the distance. Like they serve this very important purpose of widening the horizons and breaking someone out of this kind of spell, giving them courage, showing them it can be different. Yeah. And so that 100% applies to Sean and I's relationship, especially our early relationship. Yeah. Or when I was getting out. And it's a very tough thing to be going through, to basically kind of be rejected by the father, by the system. Yeah. And be like, okay, what's wrong? Am I the problem? What's going on here? Is there a deep, because you're being told the problem is you don't have your end times theology correct, right? You find some reason and then you're trying to deal with that. And the person that eventually became my therapist was the person who, of course I didn't know this at the time, was helping him understand some things and frame some things, and helped him literally write a letter to me that was like, you know what, I love you, I want us to have a relationship, but we actually can't do that in this environment, so I'm inviting you out of the situation that you're really in. Good. And I think it wasn't just like, I love you at all costs, I'm coming in there. And there's a part of him, we've talked about it, where he was like, I wanted to just run in there. And to be clear, we have been talking about how important context is, and there's a whole book if people want to like hear all the nitty gritty, but he did not have any he did not really know in detail what was going on. He just knew there was some problems, and he kind of knew the category because I had sort of confirmed it for him. Yeah. But he's trying to figure out like, well, what do I do? I'm so invested in this, and like, and that unique kind of maybe even counterintuitive response of, well, I'm going to be out here because I'm going to model that is not the healthy thing, but you're invited over here. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to make you feel bad for staying. And, I think that's one of the big points where things could have gone so differently, and in some ways immeasurably worse, And I had to get out.
Well, he had every reason to be like, see ya.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
And it would have been completely understandable.
Yeah, and I kind of did figure by the time I was getting out, there's like 4 to 6 months that we kind of called the dark ages, where it was like, well, I guess we can't. We kind of like had to break up, even though we weren't allowed to date, and like all these things. And I was just like, so nobody sticks around through that. Yeah. And I was still inside this barrier, so I didn't even like really know if he was going to be there. And whether it's like Sean has a loving family around him, and their whole family has a community. And I had been at the Opry, like you mentioned, at different places. I had met good people basically everywhere I went. But you're being told, the outside world is bad, it's scary, and like, this is where you want to be, this is God's will, this is... And what you're doing is you're going up against every one of those. Like, well, now you're going to be outside God's will. Now you're going to be against your family. You're going to be against all of these things. Yeah. And it's going to be so bad. And it's like, well, this is so bad. So I have to take the risk, and I have to see if there's something better on the other side. And I really could have gone out of the frying pan into the fire, because I didn't really, in the way that I understand relationships and stuff now, I really didn't know anybody very well, because I was not able to be known myself. And, you're lying and you're protecting and you're dissembling and you're doing all these things. And I'm just like really, really grateful that I did land in a really soft spot, in a really safe place, and people that were helping me with like you know,
Yeah.
and like for my now in-laws to be like, you don't have to stay with our son for us to want to help you.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, and to have that
Yeah.
freedom and stuff like that. So,
well, credit to Sean, and you don't need me to tell you how strong you are, but you're so strong. I mean, seriously.
I appreciate that.
No, seriously.
I think, like I said, I'm proud of how far I've come, but I know that has not been on its own, and it makes me just want to be a part of realizing every agent that worked on my family's criminal case so important. Every, you know, fundraiser that helped basically pay for therapy for me for the first few years of getting out, and all of these places where people will never even know how much they've helped me. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved and keep that, pay it forward. You know. So I try to do a lot of that. That's a lot of what I've been doing the last couple of years, honestly.
And music's been a part of that journey, right?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to go a lot of places and like sing a song and tell a shortened version of my story and sing another song and kind of just, you know, I think even as we are talking more and raising more awareness about how common sexual abuse is, childhood abuse, all these different things, domestic violence, you know, kind of cult-like high control groups, it's still hard. And I think it's not as common to have someone not just like kind of theoretically talking about it, but to kind of inhabit it and say, I here am a work in progress of what it means to kind of get through that. And it's allowed me to take some of the hardest things that I've been through and make something like really, really empowering and beautiful from it. So I'm just grateful for that opportunity as well, because each time there's a meaning making and a therapy in that as well. So, sorry, I feel like the light is just
the light's coming down.
Really coming in now.
Well, so I could talk to you forever, and I'm not going to. But
I love long form conversations and stuff. So, and I just one day I really feel like I'm going to start a podcast at some point.
Well, that's
and
obvious.
Curious Goldfish is a new like inspiration, I think.
Well, no,
so.
I appreciate that. I've felt like crying like 3 times, by the way.
Just now?
Just now. Well, no, like throughout this conversation.
Oh,
it's just.
Someone get the tissues.
Yeah, I mean it's wild, and
It's okay to cry.
Well, no, it's like I'm thinking about the moment in the book where after all the shit that you went through, you still wanted a hug from your dad, and he didn't hug you.
That's been something that's been kind of like misconstrued a couple times.
Okay.
Like there's this one of the biggest, most wide-reaching interviews that I did was super brief, and part of why I like longer form conversations is you can get a little more context and you can get a little bit more explanation. But yeah, there was this thing about me like wanting to get a hug from my dad, and people were like, well, if he was her abuser, like why would she want that? It was super strange the way that was kind of taken out of context. But that even surprised me in the moment, because I had kind of like gotten out, and it was only within the first few weeks I went back to the house, and because the family was still touring. And there was this idea of like, well, suddenly Jess is just gone, but everything's fine. She's like back in Nashville writing songs. I was specifically not. I was crying all day and going to therapy and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. But I ended up back at the family house briefly, and I wanted my laptop back because it had my writings and my songs, and he was trying to hold that. And I had taken a little flash drive where I would snuck some stuff, but I was like, I have to try to get this back. And he just was, you know, ultimately still like rejecting me, where really like he was the one who needed to be left behind, you know. But I think not every child. I was a child that still for many years there's so many answers to why didn't you leave, and everyone stop asking survivors that question. It's just such a stupid question, but there's a lot of different answers, and one small part of the answer is that I still had an inner child that wanted desperately to like have my dad be a normal dad, a safe dad, a dad that I could love, that could love me, that could make me feel protected, and like all those things. And he had never, ever, ever been that person. And part of what actually got me out that door that particular day that I left was like just accepting that and be like, this is always going to be your dad, but this is not your dad. He's your abuser. He's someone you need to escape from. He's, you know. And it was like one last little like welling up is the last time I spoke to him in person. I saw him at his sentencing. I don't think that he saw me. But it was crazy to me that inner child had one last like, can I just, and he said no. He was like, no, you're you know, and it was just so interesting, because I was like, see inner child, he's never been that and he never will.
Yeah.
You have to let that go.
Yeah. Last thing, and then we'll wrap it up. But like on that point, the whole theme of power is a huge part of that book. I mean, he was the power figure in that family in every possible way, right? What's great now, and a glimmer of that whole story and where you're at today, is he's completely powerless right now. You've got all the power in terms of
I wouldn't know.
what you're
like,
doing. Like, I mean, he's
right.
he's locked up, and he's whatever.
Well, he doesn't have a say.
Yeah.
In my life now. He had that for a very long time, and I don't really know. I think I've just kind of put like him and my way of thinking of him just on the shelf, because I know I need a lot of space and time. Just like, how about life without that dominating it?
Right.
A part of me thinks, I probably said this a few times somewhere, but part of me is like, it doesn't seem right that I would like never ever see him again, but I just, things are too good right now to like ever. You don't need him. I also can't, at the same time, I can't ever fathom letting that back in my life, because why?
No.
But anyway, I think that, anyway, I know we're kind of wrapping it up, but I want to let in what you're saying about like being strong and such, but I think sometimes I've looked back and I just really want to emphasize the gratitude and how like a lot of us heal, like we're hurt in our community and we heal in community. I think there's a lot we can do on our own, and we should do that work, and it's never ending. And building safe and good communities is a big part of that as well.
Right. Well, cool. Well, really appreciate your time, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many other questions, but I'm not going to get to them. But
same time next week.
Let's do this again. I guess one last question, because I ask everybody this.
Okay.
So I always think it's fascinating because everybody has like answers that could be all over the map. But talked about curiosity, Curious Goldfish. At this point, after everything you've been through and where you're at with your husband and the family and everything moving forward, like what are you most curious about today?
Oh my God, the list is so long. I'm curious whether I'll ever do some higher education. I feel that pull a lot. I'm very curious about whether I can actually be a fiction writer. I'm currently trying to write a novel. I'm like halfway through. So curious. It's like really the first big dream that I had was to be J.R.R. Tolkien, or something. And although I've written a book, part of my brain is like, you're not a real author until you've like written fiction, or you wanted to be a fiction author. So we're trying that. And I'm curious to see what the day-to-day life will be in like 5 years, because I can kind of see it. It's like van life with my husband, and he's taking pictures, and I'm writing songs, and we have our dog with us. I don't know if there's a kid or not. Big question mark. But I would rather know. I'm very, I think curiosity is like a really, like learning, curiosity, creativity. Those are all like really, really big words to me.
All right. So. Well, thank you so much for your time.
I'm Jessica Willis Fisher from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm going to sing you an original song called Dogwood. And to me, this song is about the authentic and beautiful, vulnerable strength of owning all parts of our story, including some of the harder things, and how our wounds can be beautiful. And this one I put out last year. It's the first single off my upcoming sophomore record. I'm not an oak tree, standing full and tall. I am not a redwood, growing old above it all. I'm not a willow, slender in the wind. Oh, and I am not an aspen with a lovely silver skin. But in the spring, there's no one that can match me. I come alive, and white is all you see. Breathe me in, and all the winter's over. If I had wooden roots and branches, bark and blooms, I'd be a dogwood tree. I'm not a poplar or sweet Virginia pine or
it's hard to find another with a flower quite like mine. Crimson in the corners, I wear my wounds with pride, believing in the beauty of the many tears I've cried. But in the spring, there's no one that can match me. I come alive, and white is all you see. Breathe me in, and all the winter's over. If I had wooden roots and branches, bark and blooms, I'd be a dogwood tree. Maybe I'll come back again after I am gone. A sapling from the earth would mean the journey carries on. I'm not a cedar as green as ever could. Oh, I will fade to nothing. This was always understood. Everyone is made of those who came before. You count the days you're given, and you're always wanting more. But in the spring, there's no one that can match me. I come alive, and white is all you see. Breathe me in, and all the winter's over. If I had wooden roots and branches, bark and blooms, I'd be a dogwood tree. If I had wooden roots and branches, bark and blooms, I'd be a dogwood tree.
Thank you. I'd love to play another original song called Honest, and this is my most recent release. And there are some days where I'm just not feeling it, whether it's getting up on stage or, the to-do list, and I'm trying to be kinder to myself and be realistic, kind of about the fact that we all need kindness and we need space to work out our different types of healing or growth, and it doesn't happen in a straight line. And that line kind of shows up in the lyrics here, but this is called Honest.
It's hard to take your own advice. Sometimes giving up sounds real nice, and I wish I never knew your name. I wonder if I'm better off doubting every last late night talk, 'cause I see it always ends the same. One step, two step, three would be another. Then I find myself right back where we began. Oh, one day, someday, maybe we'll recover. Until then, I'll be as honest as I can. I'm working on my follow through. Talk is cheap when a dream comes due, and I feel the years I fell behind. Oh, something might be wrong with me, picking off fruit from a long dead tree, and I wish I had some peace of mind. One step, two step, three would be another. Then I find myself right back where we began. Oh, one day, someday, maybe we'll recover. Until then, I'll be as honest as I can. I'd like to say it's one straight line, but it's not. You'll circle back again. Oh, it's not a destination round the bend. It's a journey as we've been. I'm happier than ever now, but that don't mean I got it figured out. I still have questions every day. Oh, I try to take it easier, slow it down when I don't feel sure. Trust that kindness is the way. 1 step, 2 step, 3 would be another. Then I find myself right back where we began. Oh, one day, someday, maybe we'll recover. Until then, I'll be as honest as I can. One day, someday, maybe we'll recover. Until then, I'll be as honest as I can.